Hello and welcome to Canyon Professional Development. During this session, we are going to be focusing on effective classroom management with a focus on the power of relationships. My name is Carolyn Flora, and I'm the K-12 Special Projects Director at Grand Canyon Professional Development. I'd like to start off with a quote by Harry Wong, who many of you might be familiar with. He is a classroom management guru. This quote states, "An effective teacher manages the classroom. An ineffective teacher disciplines the classroom." As we navigate through our session, I want you to consider what this quote means. Are one of these more proactive than the other? And how does being proactive affect your classroom management? As we navigate through this session, consider what tools you're going to take away. Take notes, jot things down. What are you going to turn around and try to utilize in your classroom as soon as possible so that it's not forgotten and so that you can start to make growth and progress in the area of classroom management? We have a lot of information that we're going to be covering during this session, but here are some of the specifics. You're going to be determining what your classroom expectations might look like. You're going to reflect on the importance of that strong student-teacher, also student-to-student relationship, and effective strategies for building those relationships. Last but not least, you're going to reflect on different routines and procedures that you will want to establish during that first week of school. Now, if you're already in the middle of the school year, keep these in mind for the beginning of next school year, unless you need a change right away. One thing I like to do in the classroom, and I even do it in my classroom with adults, is some type of getting to know you activity. Most teachers will spend maybe the first day or two getting to know their students, having them do maybe a family crest or a getting to know you poster. After the first couple of days, getting to know you activities are left to chance and they just happen on a more informal basis. The first thing that I'm going to challenge you to do is make sure that you continue to utilize explicit getting to know you activities throughout the year. Most of you have many students, and it is not feasible to get to know everybody on the level that you need to know them in 1 to 2 days. One activity I'm going to show you is utilizing something called Padlet. Padlet is an online resource. It is free. You're able to create an account with just an email and a password. You're able to create all different types of boards where students can add to the board not only in class, but also at home. It could be done from a computer, a Chromebook, or a cell phone. This particular Padlet I'm showing you was my Getting to Know You Padlet for one of my classes. You can see I was very strategic in some of the questions that I asked them. When you're getting to know your students, these questions cannot be left to chance. You want to come up with explicit questions that you are going to be able to utilize that information throughout the school year. For example, share one thing about yourself that might surprise others. This is a great one, any grade, kindergarten through high school. You find out something that might not necessarily be obvious. It also helps you make those connections between students. Maybe one student says that they really love ping pong, and another student says the same thing. You know that they have something in common, and if they were to be working on some other assignment, this might be a mutual point that they can use to get to know one another and use to build a relationship. Right now, I want you to take a deep breath and I want you to consider what is weighing on your mind when you think about the upcoming school year or the current school year. As teachers, we really have a lot on our plate and we have a lot of things that we have to navigate. When classroom management is not going well, that can increase your stress levels exponentially. The important thing to remember is that every day is a new day, a new chance, and a new opportunity in your classroom to make a change for the better. So if you're going into the school year and it's your first time teaching, you're going to start off on the right foot, creating ideas for rules, routines, procedures, and you're going to be ready to go. If you're a veteran teacher and things just weren't going well last year, or maybe you're in the middle of the school year, it's not too late to change because tomorrow is a new day. Otherwise, you're going to end up like my friend on the screen. She's saying, "Who says teaching is stressful? I'm 39 and I feel fine." The first place I'm going to start is with something that many of you might consider very simple: classroom norms and rules and consequences. Oftentimes, I go into classrooms and teachers will have rules or norms hanging on the wall. I can go around to students, and oftentimes less than 10% of the students in the classroom actually know any of the rules by heart. They have to refer to the poster on the wall. That's because the teacher most likely just hung it up there, read through the rules once or twice with the students, and it became a decoration. That is not how rules are supposed to be. We want our rules and our consequences and our procedures to be living, breathing documents. One way to do that is to have students involved in the process of creating those class norms or rules. One very simplistic way to make this happen is just by asking these two very simple questions. What enhances your learning experience? As the teacher, you can be the scribe and you can jot down all of the answers that they share. I like it when the classroom is quiet. I like it when we're working independently. If there's a little music, they'll come up with lots of different things. Now, if you're working with smaller children, of course, you can modify this question and use developmentally appropriate language. Then you go on to the other side of the coin. What hinders your ability to learn? You'll be very surprised how intuitive students are as to what hinders their ability and what enhances their learning experience. You just need to take the time to ask. Now, the great part about this is if you're the scribe as the teacher, as they provide you with answers, you can tweak those answers a bit to make them into just the right rules that you were hoping for. You see here, there's a document regarding teaching norms, creating norms. You will find that document in the handout section of the course. Here is another way you can do the same activity, asking those same questions, but it's on a virtual online platform. So if any of you are teaching online, or if you just have access to technology in your classroom, this is another free online tool called Slido. It is one of my favorites. There are all different types of polls. I often use this one. This is called the free response, where students are able to log in either using the QR code on their phone and using their phone and then typing in the response, or they can use a Chromebook, a computer, or an iPad and log into slido.com, type in this code, and answer the questions. As they log in, you get a count up here. So if you have 30 students and you only have a 20 up here, you know to ask your friends to hop on and to share their answers. In addition to having this free response, Slido has many different templates. Another one of my favorites is a word web, which is great for building background, prior knowledge, and things like that. So when you get a chance, check it out, slido.com. After you've taken the time to ask your students questions to help you develop the rules and consequences or classroom norms, now it's time to decide, how are we going to display these? Well, from my previous statements, you probably know the last thing you want to do is slap them on a poster and put them on the wall. We want them to be a living, breathing document. I often like to have my rules on separate pieces of cardstock because then I could manipulate them. I could bring them to different areas in the classroom as needed. So for example, if I were teaching middle school and I was having a problem with my students forgetting their supplies, maybe their pencils, that next week, if the rules were to the side, I would bring that particular rule to the front of the classroom and we would look at it every day. We would review it. Sounds so simple, but it's putting it at the front of their mind. You'll also notice that over here, I have an example of some online learning norms. Back a couple years ago, when we were hit by the pandemic, a lot of teachers, all teachers, had to navigate to an online platform if that was available to them. We quickly learned that we needed norms or rules just like we need in the classroom. And this is just an example of that. It's also important to remember that we need rules for when we're working in small groups or doing collaborative projects, because those look a little different. For example, with these online norms, I had to borrow this last one from my daughter's teacher. Please make sure you are fully clothed. When people see that, they chuckle. But those of you who experienced online learning know that it wasn't uncommon for, little boys to come to class without their shirt on. And why not? They were in the comfort of their home. However, my daughter's teacher had to make that a rule just so that she could make sure everybody was dressed appropriately. So once those rules are set, those consequences, and we're beginning to come up with our procedures, we need to think about classroom management and engagement and how those two things work together. We know that no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. That's a quote by James Comer. What that means is if our students don't know each other, they don't really have an incentive to be kind to one another, which can cause a lot of classroom management issues. In addition, the activities, the learning our students are engaged in class also directly impacts our classroom management. We want to make sure that not only our rules and norms are relevant, but also the content we're teaching our students. And we also want to make sure that the rigor is appropriate, that students are being appropriately challenged so they're not bored or they're not too stressed out because things are too hard. It is so important to build communities and to foster relationships. As I shared, students won't treat each other well if they don't know each other. I'd like to use an example that many of us could probably relate to. I don't know about you, but I get several phone calls a week with somebody trying to sell me an extended warranty for my new car that I haven't had for very long. Well, if you're like me, I see potential spam on my phone. I answer it sometimes. And when I answer it, I hear, I'm calling from blah, blah, blah. And immediately I say, no, thank you. And I hang up. Now, let's rewind. Say I have a friend named Jeff, and I see Jeff calling on my phone. And I answer, and Jeff says, hey, Carolyn, I was just calling. I'm working for a company and I'm selling extended warranties. Nothing's changed. I still don't want an extended warranty. But I'm 100% sure I'm not going to say, thanks, Jeff, bye, and hang up. What's the difference? The difference is I have a relationship with Jeff. And when we know people, we treat them better. When it said potential spam and I knew I didn't know them, I had nothing vested in that. It's not saying I'm a bad person. It's just how things work. So remember that. In class, you need to build that community and foster those relationships between you and your students and between students and students. You want that sense of community because the best path to engagement is through relationships. When I work with teachers, I often notice that when it comes to rules and sharing procedures and getting routines down, they hurry through it. Maybe they spend a day or two at the beginning of the school year going over everything, putting up those posters, and then that's about it. But what happens is oftentimes students aren't proficient with those rules, with the expectations. And that causes a lot of frustration, not only for the students, but of course for the teacher. For those of you who are already in the classroom, we know what it's like when we go over a lesson. We think we've given specific instructions. We ask everybody if they're ready, and they nod their head, and we send them off to work, only to have half the hands in the classroom up within the first couple of minutes. That's because a lot of times we're going a little bit faster than we probably should. When it comes to classroom management, the best thing you can do is go slow to go fast. It might take you a little bit longer at the beginning of the year, but it's going to let you work a lot faster as you continue on because you're not going to continually have to come back and reestablish the norms and the rules and go over the procedures. So go slow to go fast. In order to do that, you have to make time for explicit relationship building. What do I mean by that? Yes, we talk to our students on a regular basis. Yes, our students play with each other on the playground or talk with each other at lunch if they're in high school. That's informal relationship building. If we want to be truly successful and build a culture that has a very positive climate, we need to make explicit time for building relationships, utilizing things like the Padlet I shared with you, utilizing other digital tools, taking time to maybe do interviews, whatever ideas or activities you can come up with, it's going to only enhance those relationships and make classroom management that much easier. Once again, here is another getting to know you Padlet. One of the favorites was asking about animals and allowing them to put a picture of their animal on the Padlet. They love doing that. Here is an example of a Google Jamboard. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Google Jamboard. Google Jamboard is a resource available in the Google Suite. So if you don't have a Gmail account, you would simply go to Gmail, create an email account, totally free, very simple. Once you do that, then you have access to all the Google Suite items. Google Jamboard is one of those, and it is such a simple resource to use. It can be used in class. It can also be used from home. What I really love about Google Jamboard is all of your students can be working on it at the same time, and they can even be working synchronously. Two people can be at different seats working on the same slide. Here is a getting to know you activity where students were asked about some of their holiday traditions. They were able to write some words, use some words to describe their traditions, and then add some pictures. If they have pictures on their phone, they can use those, or they can simply go to Google and get images right off Google. Here is another one. Great way to get to know your students. And here is another one. This is a Kagan structure, a cooperative learning structure, 2 truths and a fib. Super fun way to get to know your students, for them to get to know you. You can create a Jamboard where everybody goes in and they write statements in each of these columns and they put their name at the end. They would write 2 things about themselves that were true and 1 thing that was false. And then everybody gets to decide which is which. Great activity. While I'm here, though, I have to say 2 truths and a fib on Google Jamboard is also a great strategy to use in an academic way. For example, it's great for a review, perhaps for social studies or history, where you are learning perhaps about Native American tribes, and one group has to do a slide with 2 truths and 1 fib, multiple of them, about a certain Native American tribe. And everybody reviews by identifying which statements are true and which are false. You can use it in a variety of different ways. I shared a lot of different information with you. I hope that you were able to at least identify one strategy or resource that you are going to try out. I want you to take a second right now to think. What's something you would like to use that I've shared with you so far? As you ponder that, let's take a look at this quote by Julia G. Thompson. When I first read this quote, it was really an eye-opener for me. It says, frequently students will break a rule, not from a desire to misbehave, but from a momentary lapse in good judgment. Let's think about this from our perspective as adults. How many times have you had a conversation with somebody or made a comment and thought, "Oh, that wasn't good. I stuck my foot in my mouth," right? Because sometimes we have a momentary lapse of good judgment. When it comes to classroom management, teachers often take it personally. They think students are purposefully misbehaving because they want to make their life tough, or they think that things that they're doing are premeditated. And 99% of the time, that is not the truth. It's a little easier when you're working with smaller kids because we say, oh, they're just young, they're not mature yet. But even when you're working with older kids, middle school, high school, this statement is so true. Those momentary lapses in good judgment will cause them to misbehave. But that misbehavior shouldn't identify them as a person. We don't want to immediately assume little Johnny is just naughty, right? We want to take into consideration the whole child. So keep this quote at the forefront of your mind when you have friends in class who are misbehaving. Are they doing it purposefully? Are they trying to upset you? Most likely the answer is no. When you have students who do misbehave, who are not using appropriate behaviors in class, you set the rules, they're the consequences, you have your procedures, but yes, they're children, this is going to happen. The goal then is to quickly and quietly help students get back on task without missing a moment of instruction. I want you to think about back to your time in the classroom. Did you ever have a teacher who, once somebody was misbehaving, the rest of the class had to sit for 1, 2, maybe 3 minutes listening to the teacher reprimand that student? Not only that student was missing out on further instruction, but the whole class was, because the teacher was preoccupied by this behavior. The goal is not to stop the class to discipline or take a lot of time to redirect a student. The goal is to quickly and quietly help the student get back on task without missing a moment of instruction. So if I have a friend who is playing in their desk and making some noise, and we are all doing an activity together where we're reading and answering questions, instead of stopping the whole class to redirect that student, I could simply walk over near the student, tap them on the shoulder, tap the desks twice, and say, get to work. 8 times, 9 times out of 10, that is going to work. Simple redirections are very powerful. And here are some examples. One I just used, proximity. A lot of times when students are off task, if you just move closer to them, they will automatically re-engage. One of my favorites for students who might be frequent offenders, they might have problems with ADHD, whatever it might be, is I would make some sticky notes that I would write little notes on. Get back on task, take out your pencil, put the book away. I don't know if you've had this happen, but I had the friends who would always have a book out, even when we were doing math. And it's so hard because reading is a great thing, but you need to be doing what the rest of the class is doing. So I'd make these sticky notes, and if I saw somebody doing something that they weren't supposed to do, I would stick a sticky note on their desk that had a little reminder, walk away, and they knew the expectation because I'd already shared what this looked like with them. You can't underestimate or value the use of your teacher look. We all know what that is, and so do your students. Another really important thing that you can do to help with classroom management, with engagement, with just everything running smoothly, is to always ask your students to restate directions. Because once again, we might assume that they're getting it, and that might not be the case. Asking students to restate directions is an amazing strategy. And then another thing you can do is discreetly remove distractions. So if a student is reading a book and they're supposed to be doing their math, we don't make a big to-do over it. We simply walk by them, quietly take the book, put it on our desk, and we give it back at an appropriate time. So, another quote by Julia G. Thompson: before you rush to judgment, determine why your student broke the rule. So, you have access to this document as well. This is working through classroom problems. So, if you have a student who maybe is a frequent offender, breaking some rules, and right away you're feeling a little heated, it's not going well, maybe instead of just jumping to conclusions, you have the students stay in at recess and you go through this document where you talk about the problem. You help them identify the rule that they broke. You talk about what they could do instead. And you're thinking, this is a lot of work. Well, it doesn't have to be as formal as it sounds, but what a lot of teachers don't understand is that when we just punish a student, you're on the bench. You lose, 5 minutes of your free time. That does not fix the problem. If a student is a frequent offender and they're not following directions or breaking rules on a regular basis, there's something going on. Yes, maybe it could be that there are issues and they have some behavior problems, but there are a lot of times where it's an easy fix. They're just not getting it. They don't have the self-regulation strategies to stay in their seat. How can we work with them so that they can learn, but yet they can maybe stand up part of the time? So this worksheet here helps you go through some questions to determine how you can help the student rather than just having consequences be punitive, which does not have a lasting effect. Once again, I'd like you to think about your takeaways. What is something that I have shared that you are going to turn around and utilize in your classroom right away or when the school year begins? We've talked about rules, routines, procedures. Another great quote: a well-managed classroom is the outcome of a series of intentional choices made by the teacher who has the imagination to predict student behavior and to create a reassuring framework to guide students. This is a really big quote. I would love you to stop the video for a moment and take about 30 seconds to a minute to read over this again and to try to figure out what is being said. I'll see you in a minute. Okay. I hope you were able to really get a lot out of this quote. When it comes to classroom management, this is so very important. When you're creating those rules with your students, when you're coming up with procedures to guide students in your classroom, you have a very big job. You have to make intentional choices, explicit choices, so that you are able to foresee what could be possible issues in the classroom, possible management problems. That's where the imagination comes in. One example I like to share is in the classroom, I had an aversion to pencils being sharpened. And before I really realized that I really didn't like it, I didn't have something set in stone as far as sharpening pencils. However, after some experience, I knew when I was teaching second grade, first grade, they wanted their pencils to be super sharp at all times. Therefore, I had to put a procedure into place where I would have a pencil monitor who would sharpen those pencils at the end of every day and at the beginning if there were any extras put in. And that's all the sharpened pencils they had for the day. They could come and trade their slightly dull pencil for a sharper one, but ultimately they were going to end up with a duller pencil by the end of the day, and that was just going to be it. So I had to use my imagination. Okay, I've taught first grade before. I know this is a behavior. What are some things I need to consider when I'm coming up with my rules, routines, and procedures? In order to help you do this, I have included multiple planning documents to help you plan and foresee some of the routines and procedures you might need to set and implement in your classroom. Once again, you can find these in the handouts. You have one for planning classroom procedures, one for rules and consequences, and one for policies. Now, once again, depending on the grade level you're teaching, you might not need all of these. However, I wanted to include enough so that you would have what you needed, regardless of the grade level you were teaching. I encourage you to go download these, either fill them out digitally or print them up. I like to have a handbook in my classroom where these are filled out, and I have them in paper protectors so that I can leave them when I have a substitute. It's a great way to help with classroom management when you're not even in the class. As we're coming to the end of our session, let's think about seating charts. I've worked with a lot of teachers who have different feelings about seating charts. I was not a teacher who was very rigid and had to have students in straight lines or things like that. I did all types of arrangements. I love to have small groups. Um, I love to have U-shaped, whatever I could think of. Some teachers don't quite understand the benefits of a seating chart, and there are many. One benefit is that relationship building. It encourages people to make new friends. If we allow students to choose where they're sitting, they're most likely going to sit by their friends. This is going to cause multiple issues. For example, they're probably going to be a little bit more chatty. It might cause cliques where students are feeling left out. And it can just really disrupt the overall classroom flow. When you have a seating chart, you can strategically place students near one another to help them make new friends, or sit them by people who will complement their personality. It also avoids those hurt feelings, as I mentioned with the cliques. Strategic placement, this is very important, can help unmotivated students and keep them more engaged. We always have some students who they have, they're a little more chatty, but maybe they are very good at getting started and getting their work done. You might sit them next to somebody who's more quiet, but not so motivated to get things done. They might be a perfect match. Can help with those students who are easily distracted. They can sit somewhere where it's easier for them to stay on task, perhaps in the front of the class. Of course, strategic grouping for peer collaboration. And last but not least, your sanity. Yes, seating charts are very important for keeping your sanity at times. You're able to strategically place students so that they are not too chatty, so they are not cliquey, so they are not you're not fostering more poor behaviors. So I always recommend that you consider seating charts. I like to change my student seats on a frequent basis as well, because even if we sit students by each other who don't know each other well, it doesn't take long for them to become good friends. Seating charts solve many problems and prevent many more. I want you to think about that, because I shared a quote with you at the beginning by Harry Wong, and it talked about classroom management. And here we have seating charts solve many problems and prevent many more. So here with seating charts, we are being proactive in our decision making. Now, since we are not live, we're not going to put this in the chat box unless you are joining with some colleagues, but I want you to consider one thing that you have learned that you want to implement. I also want you to consider one thing where you felt affirmed in that what you already knew. A lot of times when teachers attend professional development sessions, one of the things that they get is that, hey, I am doing a good job. I am already doing a lot of those things. So go ahead and consider, what's one thing where you really feel affirmed with what you're doing. Okay. Once again, here are our objectives. We talked about classroom expectations. We discussed the importance of those relationships. And last but not least, we talked about routines and procedures. So as I leave you today, I want to share with you our why to empower, educate, and inspire our community so that they take action to fulfill their purpose and serve others. I hope that you're going to take something away today so that you can serve your classroom community. Have a wonderful day.